Quick video of the installation woes and nightmares of installing the Simrig SR2 actuators on my existing chassis. So, following the instructions, the way you do it is you turn your chassis upside down, which is essentially impossible unless you want to take everything apart and start over from scratch and take your, steering column off and everything. So I rotated it so that it was sitting on its back 90 degrees, and it was pretty doable from that angle to do the new rails that they send you. So they send you 4 of these rails, which you have to install on the bottom of your chassis. So you got to flip it 90 degrees, install those suckers, and then you attach your actuators to those rails, which wasn't too bad. I'm still kind of confused why there's 4 bolts that attach each actuator to these rails. The heads on these bolts, for some reason, are Phillips instead of Allen. I don't know why, because in the world of chassis, everything seems to be Allen wrench, and now all of a sudden they throw you a curveball with Phillips head bolts. So that's kind of annoying. And then per the instructions, you get these 4 actuators installed and set up and tightened down. The other thing that's confusing in the instructions is the booklet says if you have a SimLab P1X chassis, which is what I've got, you install the front actuators in front of the uprights. Now, in their diagram, the front is where the pedals are, which means these actuators should be on the other side of the uprights. But when you actually look at the manual, every single picture that they show you shows that the actuators are actually behind the upright or on the seat side of the uprights. So I'm not even sure if I did it right or not, because the text says in front of and the diagrams show clearly in back of. So I've copied the diagram and ignored the text. Hopefully that'll work out for me. The next big annoyance, and the reason why I have this on a car jack right now, is because you finish installing the 4 actuators and you think you're done, and it says put it back on its feet. So that's not easy to do, because you don't want to, I'm not sure if these little pegs right here on the actuators will be able to support at a lateral angle the full weight of the chassis, and I didn't want to risk snapping them. So you got to kind of do some tricks with a dolly and try to take the load and weight off of these back actuators as you're rotating it back up to the back onto its feet. So I got it all back on its feet with the help of my wife and the dolly, and thought I was good to go and in the clear with the hardest part. And then it says install the brackets, and I'm kind of like, I should have read ahead, but now you got to install these 4 brackets, 1 for each actuator. They're little Z-shaped brackets or whatever. It would have been much easier to install these brackets without the actuators in the way, but you can install them down here, then slide them into place for the most part. So not a huge deal. But then once you get the brackets installed, you realize that, well, gee, that doesn't quite line up, and I can't just slide my actuator over to make sure that these 2 brackets are going to actually connect and touch, which they need to. So now I've got to lift my chassis back up to slide these actuators in, which means I've got to get underneath and loosen up these 4 Phillips head bolts to slide it in and attach it to these brackets, which is tough when all the weight of the entire chassis is sitting on the actuator. So that's why I've got my car jack in here to lift up, one side at a time to slide the actuators in and attach them. So you can see this is the one I'm currently in progress with. Before I get to that, actually, I also noticed that this piece right here will bump into this piece. So you actually need to make sure that you're far enough back that this will not bump into this when you slide the actuator in to attach the bracket. So the actuators don't sit at the very end of the railing like I thought they would, like the diagram shows they do when you're installing them. They sit a little bit in order to attach to these brackets. Well, once you slide them in, it starts to bump into other things on your chassis. So that's kind of a pain, because then I had to get underneath, loosen up these bolts and slide these rails back even further, a few more inches, which again, if this was all sitting on its back, this would be a piece of cake. But when you're sitting all the weight on this and you're trying to adjust the railings, it's not the easiest thing to do. So now I've got this I'm crawling underneath here trying to see, you know, bolts that are attached underneath my chassis to loosen them and tighten them and slide railings around. So why in the world they tell you to put the chassis back on its feet and then attach the brackets and attach the actuators to the brackets makes no sense at all. And I'm nervous to rotate it back on its back to do all this again because I don't want to snap these pegs, you know, rotating this 90 degrees again. And, you know, the dolly process wasn't the easiest thing in the world, so I'm trying to do it with the car jack instead. The last complaint I have, well, I'm not done yet, but this is super obnoxious. These bolts right here, again, are the same bolts that are on the other underside of the actuators. You can see they're Phillips head. Now why, I don't know, because every bolt in my chassis has been Allen up until now. Now all of a sudden I'm dealing with Phillips head. So the problem is I've got about an inch and a half of space between the top of this bolt and the actuator to try to get something in there and tighten that bolt down. So, you know, I'm not a huge tool guy, so I don't have a million tools, but I do have this thing, which is about as small as Phillips head, you know, you can get. But as you can see, sorry for this, stick this back in here. You know, even this tiny piece, oh my God. Sorry, I'm not a pro at taking videos. Even this tiny piece doesn't fit into here. So I've got to figure out now what tool I need to go buy at Home Depot that'll allow me to get a Phillips into here to tighten this bolt down. So it's like, you know, just a lot of things like that. If that was an Allen top, an Allen head, this would be a piece of cake because an Allen wrench would fit in there perfectly. But it's not, it's a Phillips. So now I'm stuck at this step after laboring through the previous 4 steps. So again, like, I don't know, it just seems like not well thought out engineering.